don't know. I'm really having it today. Honestly. Okay, so I'm gonna talk about the Zion revivalist movement in the religion in Jamaica. Uh, I know not everybody's into religion and talk about religion, but anyway, let me just test and see whether I'm sounding okay because it went off the last time. Anyway, let me just test and see whether I'm sounding okay because it went off the. Okay, so I'm sounding okay. I don't know. Maybe I wasn't meant to read that stuff before. So, yeah, I've been following these peoples on YouTube. Funny enough, like I said, I come from that type of background anyway. So for me, it is just it's nice to watch other people and how they do their stuff. So I was reading. I don't know. I happened to look up about them the other day, and they called it a cult or something, and I was like, why would they call it a cult? But anyways, I'm gonna show the. I think I've got it on here. Yeah, I have. Yeah, so I'm gonna talk about this because I think this is interesting because um I don't need the sound on that one. Anyways, let me see how I'm sounding again. Let me double check. Keep an eye on this thing now. Maybe it's the area where I'm sitting. It's not very good. Okay. Let me see how I'm sounding. Let's double check. Mic check. Okay. Let me see how I'm sounding. Let's double check. Mic check. Okay. So right, the revivalist is how I see the revivalist. They're similar to what's termed in Trinidad as spiritual Baptists. Right? They wear head wraps, they wear colours, they do spiritual works of all sorts. Um, they seem to have a lot of them. Um, right? I mean, they're all over. They're all over the place, all over the place, literally. England and, like I said, the Caribbean. I should actually pull up an example of how they are, because I can't explain them. You have to see for yourself. I don't know why it's going crazy. Every time I go on this restream, the laptop seems to go a bit crazy. So that's worked 10 times harder. Let me turn off the share button. I think it was harder when the share button's on. I'm gonna get the right one. A good example of them. Now, some people are not into religion. Well, they're into all sorts of religion. They don't deal with God and all that. But the difference with the revivalists, there's I would say they're similar. They're like similar to the Maroons in a kind of a way. The way they sing, they sing in unison together. It's like a harmonization. When you hear the harmonization, it's a it's a different kind of harmonization, and they are, I could say, colorful and how they present themselves. Um, the one who leads them have long. Well, the one that I be checking, he have long locks to his back. That's their leader, and the majority of the, I could say, church per se, have locks. So I think they're incorporating the naturality of stuff into the church, plus the colors. Because long time ago, like they used to look down on dreadlocks in a spiritual Baptist church or any type of revivalist church was looked down on. So to see it's come this far is kind of interesting. So I'm gonna show you an example of them, a little bit of an example of them. Now this thing's gonna go crazy now. Okay, let me turn off the. So that is one example of how they are when they're in their church. But they have a history of being cultish for some reason. But they have risen in Jamaica. Uh, Let me see if I can find a better one than this actually. There to get to use the rugged. Oh no, I don't even have to use that. Great, I'm so glad. Let me see.
Revival Zion.
Okay. Okay. So this is how I'm gonna come at it now. I'm gonna share the page again. Right. So this is called Revival Zion or Revivalism. Afro Jamaican cults resembling Pocomania in the in the in the hierarchy and organization in their yards in their concern with healing by devised means with spirit possession. Revivalism may also be a more general depiction of movements within Christianity which lead to renewal of favor and commitment, explores the Pietism and the Great Awakening in the North America, the Wesleys and the origins of the Methodism and the 19th century mission meetings. I don't even know whether that even explained properly.
And the bread all have different meanings and significances, and depending on the purpose, there might be different items placed on the table. In the revival setup scenario, you would also find a seal, and the seal usually consists of a basin of water on a stand that would have maybe a couple of sprigs of leaf of life in it, and that also has a significance to it.
You may notice in revivalism they use a lot of natural things. We believe in the earth and the relationship between our spiritual existence and Mother Nature. Music is very important to revivalism because music is an avenue through which spirit possession then takes place. Drums are used to induce spirit possession, and also music not only through instruments as we know them, but you can use your body as an instrument to produce music. You stamp your feet, you chant, and also you sing, and that creates a rhythmic pattern which then vibrates, and spirits or messengers are then called through those motions and sounds of the body. So music in revivalism is created by way of the body and by way of instruments used in this space.
What is interesting about that is that some of the hymns that are sung not only in revival churches, but in other Christian denominations as well.
Who will answer, gladly sing, here am I, sent me, sent me. Heart that waters, Jesus Christ. Who will go and work today? Who will go and harvest it? Who will bear our sins away?
This also speaks to the evolution of revival over time. It has become, in many instances, more of a Pentecostal religious practice and observance, and so has become more aligned with traditional Christian practice, particularly in an African American or Afro-Caribbean sense as well.
What I gather is that a part of the modernization of revivalism has to do with revivalists seeking legitimacy from traditional Christian churches, and that is as a result of the colonial legacy that Jamaicans have inherited from enslavement. So persons still view revivalism as a cult, satanic worship, evil. And because of that, revivalists are currently trying to incorporate more traditional Christian ways of worship into their rituals and into their ceremonies. So there is still that tension, that colonial tension that continues to see African ways of worship as backward and uncivilized.
From the early days of the establishment of revival churches in Jamaica, there has been a kind of suspicion about the a religious practice. And it was considered, particularly by the established churches in the early days, to be something that was not particularly welcome or something that should be practiced. So what would happen is that revival adherents, or some revival adherents, would go to their Anglican or Roman Catholic church in the morning and go to their revival services afterwards. So there was a kind of duality in practice. Revival has become more accepted in more recent years, particularly in the post-independence period, as a result of research which has exposed the practices as being not harmful to people's lives and livelihoods, but just seen as another religious practice, which has, elements going back to our ancestral roots in Africa, as well as the influence of Europe in terms of, the structure of the religious practice.
Fill your bucket with grace, Mama. Fill your bucket with grace, Mama. Fill your bucket with grace. Fill your bucket with grace. Yes. Hallelujah. Praise God.
The ethos of revivalism is deeply African. And you can see that even today by the way they perform their rituals, the way they chant, their way of dressing. And as you move across revival bands today, revivalists are actually proud to tell you two things. One, they are revivalists, and two, they are of African descent. So you'll have, for example, a Thanksgiving table that is dedicated to the African order. And what that Thanksgiving table is a recreating of an African imagination, of an African consciousness within the space. So they will use elements that they consider to be African. For example, roasted food on the table, the dressing of the space to represent that of an African authentic space. So yes, revivalists are still carrying on an African consciousness, and that has to do generally with a revival of African pride and African consciousness that is happening currently within the Western world. Revivalism today is alive and well in Jamaica. So for example, you have revival bands right across the island of Jamaica. And interestingly, what I've observed among revival bands, that you now have a lot of young people in revivalism, which is also ensuring its longevity and its survival.
There is movement between Jamaica and other parts of the world where practicing revivalists have perhaps migrated, established churches in the countries that they have moved to. And so you do have pockets of revival practice that have spread beyond the shores of Jamaica. And that also speaks to the strength of the practice. It really is a strong and self-sustaining practice. We need to recognize and safeguard revival because it represents something that actually emanated, that came out of and was created in Jamaica as a traditional practice. And it has survived pretty strongly from 1860 until now. So it is part of who we are as a people. Although not everybody is a revivalist, it still is an element of our cultural heritage that should be preserved.
revivalism is significant to our Jamaican culture because it provides a link and a connection to our African past and to our African identity. And revivalism provides a space where Jamaicans, particularly of the working class, can convene and continue to construct and reconstruct an African identity, not only for themselves, but for their children.
One thing I'd like to add in terms of the protection of revival as a cultural form, the government of Jamaica has nominated revival to the representative list of the Intangible Cultural Heritage of Humanity, which is a program run by UNESCO that gives recognition to intangible cultural heritage. So we have submitted a nomination to UNESCO and look forward to revival being inscribed on the representative list of intangible cultural heritage.
Yeah, so that's an explanation of the revivalists in Jamaica, because revivalists had a lot of prejudice against them in the early stages. When I was coming up, that was one of the biggest things, because when people would see you with a head wrap, they used to cuss after you, they used to be very, very disrespectful. That's why I'm very surprised how head wraps have come right now, because I grew up wearing a head wrap at one point in my life. And what he's talking about is actually paramount, um, because it wasn't really acceptable as well. You know, people will call you Obia. I mean, my gran used to get called a lot of names. Obia woman. Um, Even though they do deal with would I say spells? I don't know. I don't think spells is the right word, but they do healing with people. They are like the community nurse of the community, because in Trinidad that's what my gran was. So what the man's explaining as well, which I grew up in as well, was the fact of they do the drumming was always paramount, going into spirit possession, particularly. Certain seals would be on the floor. You weren't allowed to walk certain places as children. There was boundaries. So when you're brought up in those kind of situations as well, you literally never forget as well, the memories of being around those type of atmospheres. But I'm going to show you a video of the Watts. I might show you one of the spiritual baptists as well, because they're very similar, though they're in Trinidad. So the revivalism in Jamaica is not that far different from the revivalism in Trinidad, really, because they're called the shouters. They used to be called the shouters, but they don't call them the shouters no more. And they have incorporated Orishas into, like I said, Orishas into the spiritual realm of the session. You know, I think, like everything, they hide the Christianity behind everything, because I think in the times they wasn't allowed to do their they weren't allowed to be who they wanted to be. And so, like I said, Jamaica, most Caribbean histories is never too far from each other. Sometimes it's very similar. But I'm gonna show you what's. Let me show you what's. Let me show you what's one of what's. This is why I like to take off some of the videos, because when it flipping changes, it gets on my nerves. Anyways, yeah. So as you see in the revivalist one, like the guy was talking, it's the way they're doing the steps, the way they make the circle, the colors. There is another one that I wanted to show as well. So it's a very good example, but I don't know whether I can get it on here. But I'm gonna try. Hold on. Okay, I think I got it. All right, there's a man that I watch on YouTube on his little church. He's quite interesting. So I'm gonna show you a little bit of his church because I don't like when it cut to the end. So let me show you him. So you see the table they're dancing around. What they was talking about, the table that they dance around, the flowers, the candles, the water which they put. I mean, I don't know if you can see clearly on this video, but the because this is a different version. This is the Jamaican version. This is of a revivalist church. So you can see the table, the cloth, the way they dress, the white, the colors on their headscarves. It is once again like moving in a circular motion as well, and it's the rhythm of it as well. So but I'll let you watch it because like you can hear my daughter crying in the background. I don't like when she cries in the background. But yeah, let me put it back on for you again. So it's so interesting that how they call this a cult. I mean, but it's practice. Bless me. Practice is practiced in the diaspora and in Jamaica, and I'll show you snippets of the Trinidadian Baptist. There is a little bit of a difference, only slightly. Right, the only difference with the Trinidadian Baptist compared or revivalist or Pocomania compared to the Jamaican one is that they don't go in a circle. Right, that's different. So I'm going to show you a Trinidadian revivalist. Now, this is what I was brought up in. Is that, like, the only difference is that we don't walk around in a circles. I mean, and I haven't been to a church in a long time as well, so I can see the difference in everything. Um, yeah, there is a difference. The Jamaica ones, they walk, they do the circular, they tap their foot, but the Trinidadian ones, they do the singing and normal. Go to sleep, Jan. Baby's a little agitated, so I'm gonna put on the Trinidadian one now. So, so I was brought up in that kind of atmosphere, right?